to the first book of the Bible, book of Genesis, chapter number 43 today. Genesis chapter number 43. There was a Christian counselor who had a ministry of helping people who were struggling. He wrote this. He said, "For many years I worked in New York City and counseled at my office any number of people who were wrestling with this yes or no decision of surrendering to God. Often I would suggest they walk with me from my office down to the RCA building on Fifth Avenue. In the entrance of that building is a gigantic statue of Atlas, a beautifully proportioned man who, with all his muscles straining, is holding the world upon his shoulders. There he is, the most powerfully built man in the world, and he can barely stand up under this burden." And the counselor would say, "Now, that's one way to live." Now, I would point out to my companion, trying to carry the world on your shoulders, but now, come across the street with me. He would lead the people over to the other side of Fifth Avenue to St. Patrick's Cathedral, and there behind the high altar is a little shrine of the boy Jesus, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, and with no effort, he was holding the world in one hand. And he said, I would illustrate my point that way. He said, we have a choice. We can carry the world on our shoulders, or we can say, I give up, Lord. Here's my life. I give you my world, the whole world. Now, this may sound like a complete contradiction, but one of the greatest victories a Christian person can win is by simply surrendering. Surrendering to who? Well, of course, to God Himself as He is operating in our personal lives. In our story here today, the Jewish patriarch Jacob is having to surrender to God regarding a very trying time in his life. We'll read it here in Genesis 43, verse 1. The Bible says, "And the famine was sore in the land, and it came to pass when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought up out of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go again, buy us a little food. And Judah spake unto him, saying, The man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go down and buy thee food. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And Israel said, Wherefore dealt ye so ill with me, as to tell the man whether ye have yet a brother? And they said, The man asked us straightly of our state and of our kindred, saying, Is your father yet alive? Have ye another brother? And we told him according to the tenor of these words. Could we certainly know that he would say, Bring your brother down? And Judah said unto Israel his father, Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. I will be surety for him. Of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. For except we had lingered, surely now we had returned this second time. And their father Israel said unto them, If it must be so now, do this. Take of the best fruits in the land in your vessels, and carry down a man present, a little balm, a little honey, spices and myrrh, nuts and almonds. And take double money in your hand, and the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks, carried again in your hand. Peradventure was an oversight. Take also your brother, and arise, go again unto the man. And God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your other brother, and Benjamin. If I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved." Today we're going to look at this scenario a little bit closer as we discover the truth of when surrender equals victory. When surrender equals victory. Let's pray. Father in heaven, today we pray that we need your help to understand this truth, because it goes against who we are sometimes vehemently. The greatest victory that we can win as a person is just surrendering to what we're supposed to do under your hand. Father, we pray today that you would help us understand these biblical truths for personal victory. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. What does it mean to surrender? What does it mean to surrender? Well, Webster defines the word as such. It's the act of yielding or resigning one's person or the possession of something into the power of another. In simple terms, we might say it's when you give up, when we submit, when we stop resisting, when we go along with, when we humble ourselves, when we cry, "Uncle, Uncle, I give up, Uncle." I used to do that with my son. I'd lay him down, I'd lay on him, and I'd say, "Say Uncle, say Uncle," and he'd fight for a little bit, and he'd be like, "Uncle!" What was I trying to do? Get him to submit. But it's an act of our will to no longer desire our will to be done. That's what it means to surrender. Now, when we think of surrendering, we usually think of it in the terms of defeat, in a negative sense, don't we? I think in regards to surrendering, I guess the shortest war on record was fought between Britain and Zanzibar, which is now part of Tanzania, on August 27, 1896. The huge British fleet issued an ultimatum to the Sultan of Zanzibar, and then followed with 38 minutes of bombardment before the badly mismatched Sultan surrendered. We think of things, when it comes to being surrendered, in that regards, kind of being negative. You lose everything when you surrender. That's what we perceive. Often we think, again, surrendering is a negative thing because we, in essence, have lost. And nobody likes to lose. Nobody jumps up and down and says, "I lost, woohoo," great. Everyone's celebrating when we win. Nobody's celebrating when we lose. We feel pretty downtrodden. We feel defeated. We feel like our effort was in vain. We feel like really there's uncertainty for our future. And of course, we generally don't like to lose anything. But when it comes to the things of God, which tend to always have this way of going opposite of what the world and our flesh wants to think about truth and reality, surrendering is actually the pathway to that victory. It is the pathway to it. It's not the deviation from it, like we think. The surrendering I'm discussing today is a surrender of self-will, self-desire, to God's will and God's desire. That's the surrendering I'm talking about today. And there can be a real battle between those two, can't there? Oh, there can be a dogfight. You ever seen two dogs go at it? I mean, it's vicious. They're twisting and turning, fighting and wrestling and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes our will versus God's will is a dogfight. And we wrestle with God about something that's going on in our life right now. And we want victory, but we're not finding it. Right? We are at no peace in life. We are struggling. We are battling. But we're making no headway. In fact, we're probably going backwards. Again, this might seem like a contradiction, but it's anything but, because we're surrendering to God Himself. And the greatest victory in our Christian life will take place the day we simply surrender to whatever God is trying to do in our lives. And there's another way we could put it. It's called bowing the knee. Bowing the knee. I remember years ago, my pastor preached a message on bowing the knee. I had something I had to surrender to in my life. And finally I did. And I'm like, did I like surrendering? No, because I wanted to win. But I did. It was interesting. It brought victory. It brought victory. So many of God's people are finding victory because they refuse to surrender something in their life. And no doubt it's probably the thing that's in your heart right now. But we are to bow the knee to Him. There's a cliche, I think many of us have heard it, let go and let God. I'm sure a lot of us have heard that little cliche. But what does that mean, let go and let God? It's everything we're talking about here today. It's the idea behind is the idea that we are letting go of control. We are letting go of what we want and letting God do whatever He seems best in our circumstances of life. That's what that means. Letting go, letting God. In our story, Jacob is learning that lesson. And today we'll see how he did as an example for us to do the same, so that we can have personal victory. First off, let's talk about the scenario. I know I read some things, and unless you know the scenario, it's kind of hard to place what's exactly going on here. Now, I'm going to back it up a little bit, and some of this, some folks here you know quite well, some may not, so I'm just going to go through it. But the scene is part of a greater story taking place that transcends about a couple decades, really. But years prior to this circumstance here, Israel, or Jacob, as he's also known as, had a son by the name of Joseph. Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. He was one of the younger sons. I think it might have been the youngest at that time, if I remember right. He was the son of Jacob's wife, Rachel, which the Bible says that really Jacob had fallen in love with Rachel first and worked 7 years for her, and she was of fair countenance. And through a series of events, Jacob got snookered and ended up marrying Rachel's sister Leah. That created a whole drama and so forth. But up until Joseph's birth, Rachel had not had children. But then she had Joseph. And for whatever reason, Joseph, if it was because of the connection between Jacob and Rachel, I don't know. But he had become Jacob's favorite son. Jacob made him this real special coat. It's a coat of many colors. And it was well known amongst Joseph's brothers that Joseph was the favorite. And there's a lot of teaching in that, but you see it in Genesis 37, verses 3 through 4. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. He made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him. They could not speak peaceably unto him. Now, Joseph goes on to have these vivid dreams regarding him. That one day that his brethren would all bow to him, and it was kind of an interesting dream, but I think he was a little bit foolish in telling his brothers about these dreams, especially since they didn't really have a very positive viewpoint about him to begin with. And he shared these dreams, and it just further infuriated them. But long story short, they wanted to eventually dispose of Joseph. They were so sick of him. And they were sick of his dreams. They were sick of Jacob treating him in such a special way. And they had an opportunity in which they could do that. They were far away from their dads, feeding flocks, and they catch Joseph. And they were going to kill him until Reuben, the oldest, steps in and says, "Don't kill him. And we'll think of something else to do." What they ended up doing is they sold him as a slave to a group of, I believe it's Ishmaelites or Midianites, that were coming through the area, that were taking them to Egypt. They were merchantmen. Well, they sold Joseph into this slavery, and they thought, well, that's the last of him. And to cover up their deed, they told Jacob that Joseph was devoured by a wild beast. They brought back the coat of many colors that Joseph had. It was covered in blood. And they said, "This will look what we found." And it appeared that a wild beast had devoured Joseph. And of course, that broke Jacob's heart completely. And for 20 plus years, Jacob thought that Joseph was dead. Lived with that reality. But that just wasn't the case. He was alive. He was now in Egypt and would be there for 13 years living as a slave. First in the house of Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard, and then eventually he finds himself in the dungeon. Life was not going well for Joseph for 13 years or so. Until one day he was brought up before Pharaoh and interpreted a troubling dream that Pharaoh had had about what God was going to be doing in the region over the course of the next 14 years. How there be 14 years of plenty in the land, abundance of crops and food and all that kind of stuff. And then that would follow with 7 years of complete famine. And Joseph, just kind of speaking off the top, made a statement to Pharaoh in the sense that somebody should be appointed to make sure that there's food being stored during those plenty years so that we can survive the 7 famine years. I don't think he expected what would happen next, but Pharaoh saw the wisdom of God in Joseph, and Pharaoh took Joseph from the dungeon cell and put him as really the prime minister of the land. And during the next 7 years, under Joseph's leadership, Egypt would prepare food for the upcoming years of famine. Well, of course, time passed, 7 years of plenty passed, and now we get into the famine years. The first couple of years, I believe. And they were upon the region. It was at that time, of course, Jacob and his family were feeling the effects of that famine. They were out of food, but word got back to Jacob that there was food in Egypt for them to buy. So he sends his brothers, Joseph's brothers, down there to Egypt, his sons, buy food. And they come to the place where they can buy food, and they stand themselves before none other than Joseph, though they did not know that. They were unaware that the one that they had sold into slavery was now the one in which they were pursuing their very sustenance from. It's interesting the reversals that take place in life. And of course, the fulfillment of that dream, that one day that they would bow down, which they do, they would bow down to him. And it was at that moment Joseph realized all that he had gone through was for these moments of time, these years of famine that would take place, that would save alive his people, his brothers, and his father. But they stood before him. And of course, if you read the first encounter with Joseph kind of, I don't want to say had fun with them, but really kind of let them learn a lesson. He accused them falsely, put them in prison for 3 days, just to give them a little taste of what he had experienced. And then, of course, through the midst of the conversation, he discovers that his father Jacob's still alive, and that there is another brother. If you follow the course of the stories, it appears that Benjamin had not been born at the time Joseph had left. So he had never even known Benjamin. But that was his brother from his mother there. And he charges the boys, his brothers, that next time they come, because he knew that they would be coming back, he knew how long this famine was going to last. The next time you come, you need to bring Benjamin with you. And just to make sure that you do, I'm keeping one of you here that kept Simeon. He kept him captive there in Egypt for a while. Well, the brothers eventually returned to Jacob and told him everything that had taken place. And in Genesis 42, verse 35, it came to pass as they emptied their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of money was in the sack. Okay, that just further complicated everything. And when both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob, their father, said unto them, Like me have ye bereaved of my children? Joseph is not, and Simeon is not, and ye will take away Benjamin. All these things are against me. You ever felt like that? All these things are against me? That's the way Jacob felt. And Reuben spake unto his father, saying, Slay my 2 sons, and I bring him not to thee. Deliver him into my hand, and I will bring him to thee again. Reuben was always very classy with his words. Verse 38. And he said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in which ye go, then shall ye bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. That's what happens. That's what was the end of the story, at least up to this point. You're not going back down there with Benjamin. We're not going to do this. Joseph's dead. Simeon's stuck down there. Now we got to figure out. Now we got the complication of the money got somehow put back into our sacks. It looks like we stole this food. All these things are against him. That was the scenario in which chapter 43 enters into. Which we see, secondly, the struggle going on now. And this is going on really inside Jacob. Jacob was really struggling here as a person. Again, he had lost Joseph, or so he thought. For over 20 years, he thought Joseph was dead. Simeon was captive in Egypt. There was no way they were getting him out as far as they could. And now if they went back to Egypt, Benjamin, the youngest son, the one that in some regards, I guess, replaced Joseph, would have to go. And of course, in those days, there was always the prospect of something negative happening. And that's really what was the concern to Jacob. Look at verse 38 again. My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in which he goes. He shows us here that I'm not going to be able to handle it. Then shall you bring down my gray hairs with sorrowful way. I'm not going to be able to handle this. What was the problem here? What was the struggle? Jacob was afraid. Jacob was afraid. I think you can see that pretty clearly here. Jacob was extremely afraid. He was afraid of losing these things. That's what it is. And our text further shows Jacob's paranoia. First off, he just tries to ignore the issue, verses 1 and 2 of chapter 43. And the famine was sore in the land. It came to pass when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said to them, go again, buy us a little food. Guys, just head back down to Egypt. He tries to sidestep the issue. He tries to go around it. He tries to ignore it. He doesn't want to confront it. And good old Judah, his fourthborn, speaks up. Verse 3, and Judah spake unto him, saying, the man, of course this is Joseph, nobody knows that yet, but did solemnly protest unto us, saying, ye shall not see my face except your brother be with you. In other words, and they had to buy the food from Joseph. They had to buy this food from him. They weren't going to buy food if they didn't have Benjamin. And how does Jacob respond to that? Well, he lashes out. Look at verse 5. Or verse 6, excuse me. And Israel said, wherefore dealt ye so ill with me as to tell the man whether ye had yet a brother? That's totally unreasonable, totally unfair. What he's telling these boys, he's saying, what were you thinking telling them that you had a brother and all this kind of stuff? What were you? And they're like, Dad, the guy just asked if our dad was alive and we had another brother. How are we supposed to know he was going to demand us to bring Benjamin down? We had no way of knowing that. But Jacob's very unreasonable here. Why? Because he's driven so much by his fear. And he's getting angry. You know what? When you have somebody who's fearful, they're usually a very angry person. Why? Because fear and anger are kissing cousins. They usually have a struggle with anger. Why? What's causing the anger? The fear inside. They're afraid. And they're trying to stop the fear, so they're going to use whatever resource, and in this case, it's anger. You know, Jacob was angry at these. It was totally unfair of Israel to say this to his sons. What are you guys thinking? I'm like, Dad, how are we supposed to respond? But usually when there's a fear problem, there's an anger problem. They're usually connected. They're kissing cousins. See, Jacob was really struggling. And he was in a bind. You know, he said, all these things be against me. It was true. I mean, he was in a corner. He was in a real corner in his life. He and his family needed food or else they would die. In fact, Judah said in verse 8, send the land with me and we will arise and go that we may live and not die. I mean, this is a matter of life and death going on here. What was taking place? And Jacob was in this corner. He's like, I've got to get food for my family. But he was afraid that if he let Benjamin go, something negative would happen to his son, and he could not bear that thought. He was convinced it would kill him. Jacob was in a corner. And when it comes to surrendering to God, the reason we often struggle is because we're afraid. Right? Just think through it for a little bit. The reason we struggle oftentimes is because we're afraid. What are we afraid of? Something not coming to pass. Go down here today. We got some folks that are unmarried. You're afraid that you're never going to get married. And you're struggling with that. Why are you afraid? So I'm not afraid. You're afraid. Today we have folks no doubt your finances might not be in the best shape. You're afraid. You're afraid that unless you manipulate and come up with a harebrained idea that's going to work, you're going to be poor the rest of your life, and it's just going to be terrible and everything's going to fall apart. You're struggling because you're afraid. Or maybe today you've got a dream. And you're struggling with the fact that you don't know if that dream's ever going to come to pass. Fear. Right? Or you've got a set of circumstances going on in your life and you're afraid that it's never going to change. So what's all that causing in our hearts? Struggle. Anxiety. Fear. And we're just struggling with it. And we don't have any peace in our life. And it doesn't matter what we try to do to try to cover that struggle, it just kind of rears its ugly head day to day, doesn't it? It just rears up there somehow. I'm just gonna I'll figure out something just to cover it up, but it doesn't work ever. At least not for very long. But all these things, all these fears, and there's several others we could talk about, I'm sure, but it causes such inner turmoil in our lives. And the turmoil is the fear of something we really want bad not coming to pass. That's what it is. I know that's true. Because it's been true in my life. And you sit there and you're like, I don't know if I could ever be happy if this doesn't happen. But the problem is you're not happy right now, right? Not happy at all. And it doesn't look like you're getting happier. Why? Because the struggle needs to be dealt with. See, what is happening is we struggle to let it go and let God determine what's right. It's a faith problem, really, is what it is. In that area, whatever it might be in life, we have a hard time believing that all things work together for good. To them that love God, to them that are called according to His purpose. We have a hard time believing that. I know that's true because I feel the same way everyone else does. We have a hard time believing that. Again, because we couldn't imagine ourselves happy, quote unquote, without that something, whatever that is, happening. And the struggle is our effort to try to maintain control of trying to bring that thing to pass. That's what it is. We are trying to control the circumstance. That's what Jacob's doing here. He's trying to control the circumstance. He said, "You're not going to bring him down, and we're not going to do this. We're not going to go there. You guys can go down yourself. Figure it out." You know, and of course, when they have no answers, Jacob has no answers. He just lashes out in anger and hasn't made the problem any better. In fact, Judah says, for except we have lingered, surely now we have returned the second time. I don't know if this is true or not, but I don't know how long of a trip this was between where they lived and where they were supposed to go in Egypt. Well, let's just say it would take a month for them to travel forward and back, or maybe a couple weeks. So this tells me that this back and forth with Jacob over this situation had gone on for a little bit. However long that is, whether it's, I don't think this was necessarily just within an hour time frame. This, according to the text here, it looks like they had been kind of bickering about this for quite a while, and this struggle was just turning with inside Jacob, because he believed all these things are against him. And he just tried to maintain control. He was doing everything he could to make things work out, but he kept striking out. He kept not finding the victory. Things were getting worse. And now he's in a corner. You know, sometimes God gets in our lives in a corner. To the point where we can either surrender or continue to fight. But that's where Jacob was. It came to the point where he had to make a choice. Was he going to surrender control, or was he going to just keep trying to control things and yet continue to struggle and fight against what God was trying to do? And that's the point we'll come to in our lives all the time. Well, thirdly, let's see the surrender itself. With a little reasoning and commitment from Judah, Jacob finally surrenders. Verse 11. And their father Israel said unto them, if it must be, this is the way it has to go. Do this. Take of the best fruits in the land in your vessels, and carry down the man a present, a little balm, a little honey, spices of myrrh, nuts, and almonds. And take double money in your hand, and the money that was brought again in the mouth of your stacks, carry it again in your hand. Peradventure, or perhaps it was an oversight. Take also your brother, and arise, go again unto this man. And God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your other brother, Benjamin. If I be bereaved my children, I am bereaved. What happened here? Jacob finally surrendered. He finally surrendered. He surrendered to God's plan in this scenario. He stopped scheming. He stopped plotting. He stopped trying to control things. Jacob could not use any more of his resources. He was out of resources. His back was against the wall. And again, he could have kept fighting, and some people do, for his will to be done. He could have stubbornly resisted and tried to even manipulate the circumstances, hopefully to come out of the top. Instead, he chose the better route, the best route. He surrendered to what God wanted to do in the situation. He submitted to God. He said, let God give you mercy. Let God give you mercy, and do what you can. Bring this little present. That's all that they could do. Let it come what may. And again, sometimes God puts us in those circumstances in life that force a choice. To force a choice. What are we going to do? Will we submit to God's control, or will we not? Or will we just continually resist and demand our way? Demand what we want. Demand our will. Now, to submit to God's control simply means we will not fight on it anymore. Think about the circumstance here that may be on your heart right now. Can we come to the point where we stop resisting what God's trying to do? When we submit, it means we're done fighting God. Instead, what we do is we just do what He's telling us to do and trust Him to work out the details. Even if that means the details don't go the way we had hoped. Verse 14. That's where Jacob came to. If I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. If I lose my children, I guess that's what's best in this circumstance. It's not what I want. Well, I'm hands off now. I'm hands off. And that was a big moment for Jacob. It's a big moment for us oftentimes too. It's a big moment. See, you gotta understand something about Jacob. His name means supplanter. He had been doing that his whole life. Jacob was a manipulator. Always trying to manipulate his circumstances. It was prophesied that he would get the birthright. Of course, he deceived his brother by selling him that pottage. Esau, and he got the birthright. Of course, he stole the blessing from Esau as well. And he just was a manipulator. He would make deals with God. God, if you do this for me, I do that for you. He had been a conniver. He had been a schemer. Why was he doing that? Because he was always trying to get his own way. Always trying to get his own way. But that brought a lot of troubles into Jacob's life. If you read it, there's roughly 25 chapters devoted to the life of Jacob and his family. There's a lot in there about the things of Jacob and how God was working in his life. It took a while for Jacob to learn. It really did. And this was a big moment in Jacob's life. See, all his manipulating, scheming, conniving, deal-making, well, that's really what kind of brought him to this point in his life. It was all catching up to him now, to the point where he couldn't do anything. There was no more schemes. There was no more manipulating. There was nothing. It's either send Benjamin or die. That's what we call it, back against the wall. But he finally surrenders. He took his hands off the steering wheel and decided to trust God with his life's outcome. And God will make us do the same thing. Because there is no space on the throne of our lives for two lords, him or us. There is no space on the throne of our lives for two lords, him or us. And of course, he is to be Lord. But if we have something God wants us to surrender to him, we're not willing to do that, we are Lord until we do. We are the Lord of our lives until we do. But the Bible tells us very plainly, James 4:7, submit yourselves, therefore, to God. The pathway to victory starts here. The surrendering to God as the Lord of the situation. Or situations, as you might be. That's where it all starts. And maybe today we need to do that in some area of our life. Maybe there's some area of our life where we need this. Let go. Let's be done. Just do what we know what we're supposed to do or can do. You know, here you guys can take a present down there. Bring them extra money. You know, maybe there was a mistake. That's all that they could do. And they had to leave the rest in God's hands. Is there an area of our life we need to surrender today? What is it that God is trying to get us to surrender to him about in our lives today? What is it? So I've surrendered it. Well, if you're still struggling, then you have not surrendered it. If there's still that struggle, it means that there's still self-will involved. There's still self-will. So it's really hard for me to surrender. Because I want whatever that is so bad. Why not? Very much so. But I think we might be, as we talk about fourthly and finally, pleasantly surprised as we talk about the surprise. Again, in our minds, we think surrender means we just lose everything. Because that's what we understand surrender to be. The loss of absolutely everything. That nothing good can ever come out of this thing of surrender. And that's why the idea of surrender scares us so much. It really does. I mean, it's that, what I'm talking about here, probably when you think about that area of life, that scares the tar out of you. It has me at times. It's like, I just, I don't know, but the idea of surrender shouldn't scare us. Why? Because we're not surrendering to an enemy. We're surrendering to our beloved Father. Jeremiah 29:11. This is what our beloved Father is like. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. That's the surrender. That's the one we're surrendering to. Jesus said in John 10:10, I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. It doesn't sound to me like our Heavenly Father wants to go and ruin your life, or my life, does he? Now sometimes we're convinced of that. We're like Jacob, all these things are against me. And we think God's out to ruin us. And sometimes it feels like that. But according to these verses, and we could look at a whole bunch of other ones, God is interested in blessing our lives with His best. And His best will always be our best. His best will always be our best. His best will always beat our ideas of what we think is best, because we don't know what is best for us. We think we do, but God knows what's best for us. He knows what's best. Now, Jacob thought he was going to lose. What's interesting is that he gained more than he ever thought. He gained more than he ever thought. Why, what happens? Well, of course, they go down with Benjamin, they stand before Joseph, and some things happen. But we come to all find out that man that they're standing for is Joseph. And it shocks them. They couldn't believe it. 20-some years had passed. They thought, well, he's probably dead. He's dead by for who knows how long. Or they're not thinking that, I'm sure, imagine thinking to yourself, my brother who we sold into slavery is now the second most powerful man on the world. It just doesn't happen every day, But it did here. They discover this. And he kind of gives them an insight into what's going on in the world, and the famine and so forth. And of course, he sends them back to their father to bring everyone to Egypt, to where Joseph could take care of them. And he sends them on their way again. If you go to Genesis 45, you see in verse 25, we'll pick it up there, what happened when they arrived home. And they went up out of Egypt and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. It's like, for 20 plus years he had believed that Joseph was dead. Now all of a sudden you get the news that he was alive, and he's this big ruler in Egypt. Like, what? Kind of hard to process. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. In other words, he filled them in on the story a little bit. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry up, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And Israel said, It is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. Jacob never saw this coming. How could he have seen it coming? But it would have never happened had he not surrendered to what God was trying to do in the situation. And God's trying to do something in each of our lives today, and the best thing we can do is just surrender to whatever it is, and whatever God wants it to do, and just let the chips fall where they may, knowing that some way, somehow, there will be good that comes out of this, and our life will be blessed as a result of it. That's what happened to Jacob here. We might be pleasantly surprised if we can just give God the benefit of the doubt. I love this verse, Psalm 84:11. For the Lord God is a sun and a shield. The Lord will give grace and glory. No good thing will He withhold from them that walk uprightly. If we do right, if we determine to live right, if we just surrender to what God's trying to do, God's not going to withhold good. God's not going to withhold blessing. He'll pour on the blessings, but until we come to that point of surrender, where we stop fighting, where we give in, where we just say, Lord, not my will but thine, I am okay, I will go forward, I will trust you, I will do what I'm supposed to do, the surprises won't happen. And we'll just continue to struggle and swirl and go in so many other different directions. Maybe today, instead of quitting on God or trying to change your circumstances and situations by our own scheming, maybe today the best thing we need to do is just simply surrender to God. Lord, I take my hands off. Let go. I trust you. I'm just going to do what I know to do is right. Let the chips fall as they may. The chips generally fall in very good ways. Now that doesn't guarantee, I'm not saying that's going to guarantee you're going to get the thing that you're hoping for. But what you're going to get is whatever was best. And if it's not the thing that you're hoping for, it is going to be something better. Because God doesn't give poor gifts. God doesn't give fruitcake. Maybe you like fruitcake, I don't know. I've never gotten one for Christmas, but I sure hope I never do. God knows how to do the best things. But there must be a willingness to surrender, because that equals victory. What is it that God is wanting you to surrender to in life that you are resisting to? And that we're just trying to maintain control over? You know where all that control is anyways? Well, up here. It's not reality. But God's trying to win the victory up here. And in here. When He does, that's when the blessings of God can fall. But until then, the struggles will just continue to progress. And for some folks, it goes on for years. And I say, you and I don't have years. Our time is short. And we learn to surrender now. It is glorious. Let's stand.